Trust me, when I was in mute also, I was saying all the nice things, sir. So the mute happened by default. But gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Pandey on the show. And I can tell you that the DIPAM, this entire department, this entire team right now is working 24/7. I've been told that they start early, they wrap, there are no office hours, and that's largely because of the kind of good work the department and the DIPAM is doing. The disinvestment target, which we all know, which has been shared by the finance minister, clearly means that this is one space, privatization is one space where indeed a lot of engagement and lot of strategic decisions will be taken. Mr. Pandey, what a pleasure to have you on ET Now. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Budget, in a sense, has really raised the bar of expectations and hopes of high delivery. Are you feeling nervous?
No, I'm not feeling nervous because I think it's a very exciting budget, and it really unveils a very bold new policy of the government, the privatization policy. And I think this policy is, I would say, is probably would like to complete the 1991 big opening that was taking place. I think for the PSCs, this would be akin to 91, the new policy.
How exactly the disinvestment program for FY22, sir, is likely to start? Will it be maximized in the first half or the second half?
I think it will be on continuous basis, because I think a lot of transactions have been actually named by Honorable Finance Minister in her budget speech, including quite unusually actually that even the specific transactions have been mentioned, which we are going to close in 21-22. And of course, the work began early on, and we had COVID setback, but back on track now. And I think those will be taken to logical culmination. So they will come on, in different periods, the first quarter, in the second, and the third, and the fourth, and we have our plan ready.
Mr. Pandey, the naysayers would say that intent is right, but execution and process is something which always will be a challenge, because it's never been easy for the government to privatize PSUs, because there are multiple challenges on the labor front, on the process front. How would you simplify that?
Well, I think this privatization has to be, achieved within the economic and socio-political context that we are in, and the challenges we face and the challenges we address. So there's no shying away the fact that it is a difficult task, but all the difficult tasks also have been achieved and will be achieved.
The number which the finance minister shared, Mr. Pandey, when she was presenting the budget, how have you arrived at that number? Did you look at market dynamics, market valuations to arrive at that number, or that number is a ballpark number?
No, I mean, there is a fair amount of detailed work on that number. That there are a series of big ticket transactions that we have there, and actually basically they were unveiled in the month of November 2019. We had made progress, but in between, I think you had COVID pandemic. So while we did, as we recovered from COVID pandemic a little bit, and our transactions in the market have resumed, and we have raised quite a bit of money, including a very successful IPOs, starting with Mazgaon Docks, and then we had one on IRFC which just closed, and as we speak, you may see RailTel IPO in advertisements coming on, because it's opening next week. So apart from that, there are several minimum public shareholding transactions which were done. So we have, taken the opportunities as offered in this, but cognizant, balancing with the fact that we owe it to our investors, particularly investors in CPSE stocks, that we will not actually do disinvestment in a manner which will adversely affect them, only from the point of view of, price overhang that people had been complaining about, the repeated offerings at discounts. I think that sort of thing will not happen. We'll be more selective, we'll be more this. And so in tune with this, and I'm glad that the investors have actually started responding to the new change in our stance, because our change in stance is particularly reflected by Honorable Finance Minister in her statement to the budget, where she said that the strategic disinvestment and actually in the form of privatization would be the main leg of our disinvestment, and minority stake sale will only be a sort of a standby. So therefore, this is a very clear articulation of the change in the policy. And this policy actually unveils a whole lot of new dimension over the next 4 or 5 years of the kind of companies which will actually come to the market for strategic sale.
Mr. Pandey, I distinctly remember immediately after the budget at the Secretary press conference, you did allude to the fact that this is the new privatization process and it would be a rolling process, which means it will not stop at 1 year. It will be an ongoing process. So while we have a sense of the number for next financial year, what happens after that? How strong this process would be? Because this would be a multi-year process. What happens after FY22?
As I said, that this is an old pipeline and the new pipeline. And typically, if an M&A transaction takes about 6 to 9 months, depending upon the complexity, you would always have a rolling plan where the new pipeline keeps getting added. The latest one was added to this pipeline is RINL, which is a Vizag steel plant. And so therefore, I mean, these new things will start getting added. But I must say that, there you need two hands to clap. And obviously, if we have an offering, we also expect that the private sector interest is also coming forward to pick up those offerings. So as private sector sentiment also revives through the slew of measures which the government has taken in terms of economy and the stimulus, the capex, and so on, we would expect them also to come and make disinvestment offerings as one of the important what we want is that this policy is not actually to just about raise numbers for the budget. This policy is for growth of India, growth of employment, growth of enterprises. And obviously, asset recycling, asset monetization, brownfield thing, non-core, this is only to instill the sense of productivity. I would say this is a structural reforms and the very important structural reforms going forward.
I can share with you, sir, the level of excitement among investors after the disinvestment number was shared and the kind of good work your department has done is absolutely incredible. We spoke last in the month of October, November, and post that conversation, PSU stocks in a sense have massively got re-rated. Earlier in the year, or earlier in somewhere in 2020, Mr. Pandey, you did allude to the fact that PSU stocks in India are not getting their fair value. Markets are not recognizing the true potential of some of the great PSUs India has. Are you very conscious of that fact? Are you consciously working towards a fact or process where PSUs should get better recognition from investors and markets?
Indeed so. Because, this is basically three pillars. The first one is to look at the PSUs themselves and look at the way they actually perform, because performance is also very important. And so therefore, I think what you're doing is that in some of those MOU criteria, we are including from next year onwards a number of, the marking system, which is, quite attuned to the market. How the market listed companies, how is their market cap increasing? How is the engagement of the management with the market? What are we doing with the return on capital employed and return on equity? what is the asset turnover ratio, whether your assets should actually be producing sales and they should not be producing, so the capex has to be really productive. We have also said that compliance to having an asset monetization plan is a must. If you don't have a good plan, if you don't execute, you get a minus. So these are the kind of incentive system we are working for. The system. The second one we said is consistent dividend policy. And therefore, we have even gone for dividend even more than once in a year. Typically, that was conventionally done, and high dividend company could even actually probably be even announcing dividend with every quarter, interim dividend every quarter as well. So there is clearly government is a shareholder, but not the only shareholder. In a listed company, we have responsibility. There are minority shareholders on the other side. And we also don't want decision making at the government level to be wrecking the prospects of those investors. So that's the point. The second part of the strategy is that we have stopped ETF, because ETF were claimed to be causing a lot of consternation, because there were repeated offerings.
Finance Minister, that is going to be a clean disinvestment number where one government company will not be merged with another government company so that the targets are met. This is going to be clean strategic stake sale.
Well, I mean, I would not say that we can say in that manner, because in some of the cases a consolidation may be necessary. If you look at our policy, when a certain consolidation will be necessary, that will be done. But that is not really, as I said, that we are not approaching only from the point of view of fiscal number, but as a point of structural reform. Then obviously we are very conscious of the fact that if one CPSC is sold, government stake in one CPSC is sold to the another, just to get the fiscal number, obviously that may not be treated as a reform, because ultimately reform will come when the control is passed on, and the control will be passed on only if we do strategic disinvestment, strategic sale. Because even if we actually do minority stake sale, of course we share the company and its prospects with the investors, but certainly the government doesn't cede the control there. The control remains with this. So therefore, the ultimate objective, if government says that it's not business of the government to be in business, that will be only fructify if we not only remain confined to only the listing and giving offerings on the minority stake sale side, but actually pass on the control to the private players. So that's what the ultimate intention, and that policy has been clearly stated and outlined by Honorable Finance Minister.
Mr. Pandey, when we met last, that was about 2 months ago, and that time you indicated that BPCL divestment is 6 months ago. So simple maths, 6 minus 2, that means BPCL divestment should happen in next 4 months?
Well, I think, yes, I think we are targeting the first quarter.
At what level is the engagement in BPCL from interested parties?
Well, the engagement is intense now. There's a due diligence stage.
And the reserve price and other strategic pricing has been identified.
Well, as I clarified, as per our process, our process is basically on value maximization, and obviously we have to take all precautions to see that the value is maximized. So what are the processes really clearly laid out? One is that competitive bidding. So it's all based on competitive bidding. Entry barriers we are keeping low but reasonable. We are normally not having technical criteria, in the sense that the strategic buyers would be only belonging to a particular industry. We know that diversification is taking place. So there are people who are moving on to different industries, and there are a lot of other players who are coming in the market. So therefore, we are having least of the criteria, only to the extent of net worth criteria we normally have to ensure that actually the transactions will actually be consummated. So that is one part of it. The second part is, as I said, criteria which are reasonable. Second is competitive bidding. Third is a reserve price value fixation that's always done after the financial bids have been logged in. And we are very conscious of the fact that we don't want any system leak or anywhere on any of the reserve price or any particular person to take any undue advantage of that. So therefore, we have a process where reserve price will be fixed based on professional advisors that we hire, but it will be fixed only at the appropriate time after the financial bids are locked in.
The Honorable Finance Minister also referred to 2 banks which would be privatized where majority stake would be sold. How soon do you think you will be able to share the names?
I think it should be soon, because Finance Minister really mentioned about the intent, which was the major policy on privatization, which I think many analysts and economists and the market players have been waiting for a very long time now. So I think the holding company or the privatization, that constant debate has been put to rest. And then the action, the 2 public sector banks and 1 insurance company. And you read it also with our policy, a new PSC policy for Atmanirbhar Bharat, in which we say that the 4th sector, strategic sector, which is banking, insurance, and financial services, we will only be retaining the bare minimum. So this is a broad policy, and of course, identification will be done in due course, and process will be carried forward. But the way Finance Minister has mentioned in his speech, the action is already intended. So it's not merely a change of legislation, but also the action that will follow.
Mr. Pandey, let me try my luck. I'm a journalist after all. My job is to also perhaps try and seek as much information I can for our viewers and the attendees here. The 2 banks which the Finance Minister referred to, are they listed or they are not listed?
No, I would say that we will cross the bridge when it comes, and we will certainly share that information with the media at the appropriate time.
If I insist, how would you respond?
I would insist, you would not insist.
Mr. Pandey, before the year ends, the big one is, of course, VSNL, now Tata Communication. Government, your department has already indicated that government wants to sell the stake there. Where is that process, and are you confident that the remaining stake in VSNL or Tata Communication will go through?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Where is the LIC IPO, sir?
LIC IPO is, as I've explained also earlier in different media interaction that I have, that the critical thing is to prepare for it in different aspects, and simultaneous work has been going on that. So FM has already introduced a Finance Act, and LIC legislative amendments which we required in the LIC Act are a part of it, basically aimed at the IPO. Because there are structuring issues, there are also issues regarding the constitution of board to make it, amenable to listing. The second leg is, of course, the preparing it for in terms of various activities for preparing its prospectus. And I think that work is going on. We have got professional advisors which are in place, which are advising on a day-to-day basis. The plan has been drawn up. The third critical item in the LIC IPO has been the discovery of the embedded value, which LIC has not been earlier doing it because it was actually exempt from doing so. It's an important requirement from IRDAI for before listing, you got to have an embedded value. And that work has actually started with LIC appointing their advisors and also changing the software. The work is on. And DIPAM itself, we have appointed the reporting actuary independent reporting actuary also to report on that. So this is the process which will is necessary work which is going on. And as regards when we will consummate the IPO, I think FM has already indicated that it will be done in FY 21-22.
Are you looking at selling a significant stake in LIC? The reason I'm asking you this is, let's take an example of NTPC or Coal India, where the government, when these companies they went public, they did not sell a large stake, but subsequently via the ETF route, the government kept on reducing their stake, which in a sense had an impact on the market price. Would you be having a different approach for LIC IPO?
We will have a different approach in IPO. As I said, that in general, we have not been able to go. The ETF was more like an index thing. The problem was that if you put different people in the different basket, it was intended to actually diversify. But our point is that any instrument which is used excessively sometimes does not yield results. So, I mean, in case of LIC IPO, I think it's an early to say what will be the size of the IPO that will come. But certainly, it will be a large IPO. And I think in the legislation itself, we have provided that up to 10% can be reserved for the policyholders.
Air India, Mr. Pandey, may not be easy. I'm not doubting the intent here, but given the fundamentals, A, of the sector, and B, how the landscape essentially has changed for the global airline sector.
No, certainly, I think the airline is on the recovery phase, and we had a very deep impact on that. And now, I think from here onwards, we can only see recovery in the aviation sector, which is happening already. So therefore, it's a going forward, and airlines will go for a long time. So it's not a really immediate 4 to 5, 6 months issue. In case of Air India, we had enough opportunities earlier for the Air India. We had a turnaround plan which didn't succeed. And ultimately, it had to be divested. It also fits into our new PSC policy, which itself wants government's roles. And certainly, airline, shipping, and all these things is not also very much in our strategic side.
Would you say that strategically, you would also be looking at selling or reducing your stake into a sector like metals or commodities?
Well, metals are generally not in the strategic sector, the way the policy is.
My colleague Ruchi, who tracks the ministry very closely, she's just pinged me with a question, and she perhaps wants to ask and wants to know from you that you have opened up strategic sectors where the government will have maximum ownership in 4 sectors, something which you already mentioned. Which means if I look at the size of the work which will now start at at DIPAM, is going to be huge.
Certainly, I think it's a whole new world actually, which will open up and will need to build up capacities.
Mr. Pandey, there is definitely a change both in terms of ideology, approach, and also the way you're conscious of the market dynamics. Why there has been such a big 180-degree turn at the DIPAM?
No, I don't think it is an evolution if you really look at it, because the strategic disinvestment policy was opened in 2016, and in fact several transactions have been carried out. In fact, Air India and others, there have been, it was an EOI was issued even earlier. Of course, it didn't succeed at that time. So I would not say it's a 180-degree turn. I would say it is also a learning process and an evolution. And I think also COVID crisis and others have told us that, if we really catapult, Indian economy into high growth path, we need to have structural reforms, which will go into the medium term. So it's not a question of 1 year fiscal and 1 year number that we are looking at. This whole policy has to be conceived in terms of how our enterprises, at least some of the public sector enterprises, together with whatever the private sector enterprises, can actually grow to a level where we really become Atmanirbhar. So what is Atmanirbhar Bharat? To produce, at the low cost, high productivity, high, reliability, and with good quality for us and the rest of the world. And in order to do that within the boundaries of India, it's not really, it's ownership agnostic.
Couple of last questions, Mr. Pandey, and something which in a sense is a political challenge. We've seen that every time when government has tried to divest their stake or ownership, they have to fight with labor unions. Labor unions put their arms up in air. They fear job losses. For private sector, this kind of a proposition sometimes gets nightmarish. How will you ensure that this process is smooth?
I think we are also, engaging with the labor union, and we have to look at the present context, economic context. I think what we really want, jobs and productive jobs. And this is the way only India can grow. So I think the jobs have to be, that means, you have to, in order to create jobs, you have to see, you have to have organizations which can handle the very fast technological change which is happening. Manufacturing is undergoing a sea change. Services sector itself is undergoing a sea change. We have different sectors being, the sectoral shifts are taking place. Now, what we really require in, amazing level of smartness of the managements and workers in order to also not only, go for the newer avenues very quickly, shift your focus, adapt new technology, but also learn new skills. Now, what we really see is that we will require to equip ourselves, both the management and the labor, with a sort of nimbleness. Ultimately, it's any good enterprise, any successful enterprise is a joint thing with it. It's not between we and they kind of a situation. If we have to secure jobs, both for the management and the labor, see, if the company falls, if the management jobs go, so it's not that, it is nobody's interest. If they, it doesn't help the economy. It doesn't help. You end up in importing. If you can produce the same quality and with the cost and all that, and technologically you keep on advancing, and in fact you, rather than you meet your demands and you export to the world. That's what India is. India is young, and it needs a lot of jobs. So therefore, we have to really see, how does it matter? It's a public sector. The point is that we recognize that in the public sector, we really do have this issue because the government is bogged down by huge number of other issues as well. So the kind of focus you require for a company may not be available actually the way it is available in the private domain.
Two more questions, Mr. Pandey. The fact that the disinvestment targets for this year will not be met, can it be blamed only on COVID?
Of course. If you really look at it, the way, I really encourage you to do also track PSC's, PSU, this thing. Please don't look at Sensex if you are talking of CPSCs. Please track the other index, which is BSC CPSC index. See how it tracks, how it fell. That's only the one part of it. And, two of our major transactions which were on board, the oil and the, aviation sector, were precisely the sectors which were initially hit by COVID. And mind you, we have been working all through in COVID times. And in July, we had a bond ETF. Of course, you don't grant us any benefit, because you always media is obsessed with a single number of how much you have produced the disinvestment receipts. So you don't see the reform, what is taking place. The Bharat Bond ETF is a unique product in the world.
It is, and we are very delighted about the kind of product.
We had another tranche which we had in July, a very successful thing right in the midst of the very heavy COVID.
I must say, sir, the kind of numbers and the kind of transparency and the kind of indications what you've given her, not me, everybody is certainly very excited, and global investors are doing cartwheels that this is the government privatization process will be the single biggest reform which will change the course of India's growth. I used to always say this, that before the budget, India came back from survival to revival, and now from revival, we will actually go to flourish. One last question, sir.
But I must say that we need two hands to clap. So if we are offering, there has to be some other, equally important. So I think when we express EOI, we expect a number of bidders to line up. So I mean that will encourage us to give off more offerings.
A lot of senior management people on this team, so that is going to be perhaps an indication from you to them that look, the government is looking at keen engagement and for strategic sale in key sectors. One last question, sir. What is the idea of national champion which the finance minister alluded to? How does this fit in your entire strategic sector narrative?
Pardon?
The whole idea of national champion which the Honorable Finance Minister referred to in the budget, how does this fit in with you, with your department?
No, I mean, our department is also, the point is that, as we say that we have some of the strategic sectors in place, and we have sort of set that bare minimum. We are looking at, these should be, whatever bare minimum is, that they should be really the big ones. I mean, they should grow, they should be, benchmarked to the best in the world, and they should be made free. We have started looking at dividend. I mean, media is not tracking dividend because in my website, I put the dividend receipts as well. So, I mean, the dividend goes to the investors. I mean, to me as well as to to the government as well as to several minority investors who have invested. So these are all important. They're all interconnected. And so therefore, what we want is that, the organization which we will part with should also reach heights. The organization which we should retain, they should also reach heights. And together it will be Atmanirbhar India.
Well, we all should consciously work towards that. The tagline with ET now is always rise with India. And let me assure you, sir, that if we were in a normal setting, not a digital setting, this entire conversation of ours would have received a table thumping applause because you've been candid, you've been honest, you've been frank, and you've shared nothing short of a very visionary intent of where the department wants to take the entire disinvestment process. Let me assure you that thousands of investors and attendees who are watching this, they would be excited after the kind of firm indications which you've shared with us. Thank you very much, sir. And I certainly hope to connect and certainly hope to see much more of you going forward.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.